welcome to this 13th and I think the last part of this multiple choice quiz program. What we're going to be doing in this particular movie is to do two things. One is to create or get the program to basically listen for the enter key being pressed, so that can be used in place of either the next question button or the retake quiz button. Also, I'll just mention that we want to now go through and essentially change all the colours from oranges and blues to that burley wood colour, or something else of your particular choice. Okay, let's get on to the perhaps more important part, which is the binding basically, or the listening for the keyboard being pressed. Now, as you can see, in this process question function, I've actually put something in here already. So let's have a look and see what this is about. Now, when a user gets a question, the radio buttons are active, and each of them basically is linked to this process question method, so that when a user clicks on one of them, this particular method will be run. Now, what we want to have happen here is that at some stage we want the next question button to become normal. In other words, a user can click on it, and you might recall, if we skip back up here to where we made that next question button, we had put some command binding in. So in other words, the program is listening for this button being pressed, and when it is, it'll run this particular function, make another question. Now what we want to do is we want the program also to listen for the keyboard enter key to be pressed. Now what we're doing here is we're basically going to say to run this next question function through two different ways. One is the next question button being pressed, and the other is the return or enter key being pressed. Now that's going to mean we've got to do something to down here on this next question function to get it to listen for more than one thing, or to allow more than one particular event to call it, and we'll deal with that in a minute. But let's just come back up here and have a look at this line of code here. So what is this saying? Right, we're going to ask the parent window to listen for this key being pressed. Notice how it's put inside quotation marks with those triangle brackets around it, and this is the particular key that we're listening for being pressed, and the return key means the same as the enter key. Now how do you get the parent window to listen for this key being pressed? Well, this is the purpose of this bind method here. Okay, so that's what we're doing, and this is the method or function that will be run when a user clicks on that return key or enter key. Now you may be wondering why the parent window. Well, you can try and put binding on particular frames and things like that, but I've found from experience that the best way to get the program to work the way that you want it is to use the parent window. Now the parent window won't be bound to the enter key until a user has clicked on one of the radio buttons. Then this process question function will run. Otherwise this code will never come into play here. So essentially this will only happen when a user has clicked on one of the radio buttons, and we now have the program listening for the enter key being pressed, and also up here for the next question button being pressed. So how do we get the program to listen for more than one particular event that may call this function? What we have to do here is we can use this particular piece of code. This asterisk, ARGS, means You can listen for more than one particular event. More than one event can call this function here. Without this here, you will get an error. Okay, so let's save this and give it a run now. Okay, so I'm pressing the enter key, nothing's happening as we would expect because a user hasn't clicked on one of the radio buttons. Let's click on one of the radio buttons. Okay, I'm not going to click on next question, I'm going to press enter, and sure enough we've been taken to the next question. The process question has been finished and we've called on next question, and that has been run successfully. Now, one of the things that we want to have happen here is that we don't want to go to the next question until the user has chosen one of these four options. Now, the problem being is that that binding, where the parent window is now basically still listening for the enter key being pressed. So even without me answering this question, if I now press enter, it's going to take me to another question, and we're going to actually get an error message here as well. So that's not what we want to have happen. We need somehow to turn off the program listening for the enter key being pressed. So how do we do that? Well, when we call on next question, excuse me, I'm just trying to get myself in the right position here on my other screen. Just one moment. Right, so we're here at next question. Now, essentially, what we want to have happen at some stage in here, perhaps after we've disabled the next question button again, we need to have a decision being made, and something like this: if self.index is less than or equal to the length of self.questions minus 1. In other words, if we have not yet reached basically for any of the questions that are real questions, if self.index is still basically pointing to a real question, then what we want to have happen is that we need to turn off that binding, and we use a method called unbind, and we want to unbind the return key. Okay, so once next question has been called, we disable the next question button and we also turn off that binding. But you only want to turn it off if we actually have a real question that we're still trying to deal with. Okay, so let's save that and give that a run. Okay, I'm pressing enter. Okay, that's good. Now I'm pressing enter again and nothing's happening, and that's what we want. Okay, so let's now go through to the end. Okay, so let's choose that one. And we only have 2 questions, and I'm pressing enter here and nothing's happening. And that's a problem, because what we want to have happen here at this stage is not only can a user click on retake quiz, but we also want to have the user being able to press the enter key to retake the quiz as well. So that binding for the enter key, we need to somehow tell the program to, at this stage, run retake quiz when the user clicks on the enter key. So how to do that? Well, we're going to go back up to this function or method called process question, Now here we put some binding in when we hadn't yet finished all the questions. Okay, so if we get to this stage here, then we want the program to reconfigure the button to retake quiz, and we want to run the retake quiz command or function, and at that stage we also want to put some binding in, where we're going to again bind the parent window to the return key and run now the retake quiz function. And the function then we're running self.retake quiz. Make sure you take out that open and close brackets if they go in there. Okay, now that should run pretty well. The only issue once again is that now this retake quiz function is now listening for a button being pressed, or sorry, I should say the program will try and run this function when two possible events can call it: user clicking on a button or pressing the keyboard. So like we did previously, we need to tell it to accept more than one possible event calling it, and the way to do that again is *args. Okay, so let's run this, see how things go. Okay, pressing enter, nothing happening. Okay, that's good. Press enter, we want to go to the next question. Okay, yes, that has happened. Now let's go and choose the next answer. Okay, retake quiz has now become active. Pressing enter has now called on retake quiz, and we're back at the beginning. Okay, let's just go through it one more time. Press enter. Press enter. Yes, that seems to be working fine. Okay, so I think we've basically finished this part, and the only thing I'm going to ask you to do is this burly wood color. I'll just highlight it once there, copy that. Let's go and find a few instances where we've used some rather standout colors just to see where frames were and things like that. What I need to do now is to basically go through and replace all of those colors with something else. Well, the green one down the bottom we don't want to change. That's the foreground color anyway. Okay, this background being red here. Okay, and I'll leave you to go through and find other instances where it does need to change. I've changed a few, and you can see that that makes the first screen look a lot better. Begin quiz. In fact, we may only need to change those few. In fact, that's correct. Okay, so that's the end of that part. Now, what are we going to do to try and extend this a little bit more? Well, one thing which we haven't really looked at in too much detail is a user typing in things into the program using the entry widget. So this particular program would be better if we could perhaps have the user type in their name into an entry widget, and then once they've done that, perhaps by pressing enter, we can then show this begin quiz button, or just getting them to type it in and having the begin quiz button appear anyway. And then perhaps up here we could have welcome and then their name to the parts of the quiz, fail quiz. Okay, and something that perhaps uses their name as part of the program. Right, we'll discuss that a bit more perhaps in class.